What happens when two of the most powerful women in media collide in an explosive confrontation that nobody saw coming? You won't believe what unfolds when Meghan Markle faces off against Gayle King in what started as a simple promotional appearance, but quickly spiraled into one of the most shocking moments in television history. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below because you're not going to believe what unfolds. Last night's CBS Mornings episode was supposed to be straightforward promotional content. Meghan Markle had agreed to appear on the show to discuss her latest humanitarian initiative and upcoming Netflix projects. The Duchess of Sussex arrived at the CBS studios in Manhattan, looking composed and camera-ready, her signature polished demeanor intact as she settled into the familiar interview chair across from Gayle King. But from the moment the cameras started rolling, something felt different. King, known for her direct interviewing style and close friendship with Oprah Winfrey, seemed unusually prepared with pointed questions that went far beyond the typical promotional talking points. The tension in the studio was palpable, as crew members exchanged glances, sensing that this wasn't going to be the friendly chat everyone had anticipated. "Meghan, thank you for being here." King began with her trademark warm smile, though astute viewers might have noticed it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Let's start with your recent projects, but I have to say, there's been quite a bit of conversation about your approach to public life since stepping back from royal duties." Markle's posture stiffened almost imperceptibly, her media-trained smile remaining in place as she responded, "Thank you for having me, Gayle. I'm excited to talk about the work we're doing with our foundation and the important causes we're supporting." King nodded but didn't let the deflection slide. "That's wonderful, and we'll get to that. But I think viewers are curious about something else first. There have been some interesting developments regarding your relationship with certain members of the press, and frankly, some of your former staff members have been quite vocal recently." The change in Markle's expression was subtle but unmistakable. Her jaw tightened slightly, and her hands, which had been relaxed in her lap, clasped together more firmly. "I'm not sure what you're referring to, Gayle. I'm here to discuss positive work and moving forward." "Of course you are," King said, her tone remaining pleasant but carrying an undercurrent of something sharper. "But moving forward sometimes means addressing the past, doesn't it? Just last week, your former communications director gave an interview where they described what they called a pattern of behavior during your time as a working royal. How do you respond to those characterizations?" The studio fell eerily quiet except for the low hum of cameras. Markle's media training was evident as she maintained her composure, but there was a flash of something dangerous in her eyes. "I think it's unfortunate when people choose to share private conversations or mischaracterize situations for personal gain. I've always maintained that there are three sides to every story: yours, mine, and the truth." King leaned forward slightly, her journalistic instincts clearly engaged. "That's an interesting way to put it. But when multiple former employees independently share similar concerns, doesn't that suggest there might be some validity to their experiences?" "What I find interesting, Gayle," Markle said, her voice taking on a cooler tone, "is how quickly people are willing to believe negative narratives about me specifically. I have to wonder if there are other factors at play here." The implication hung in the air like a challenge. King's eyebrows raised almost imperceptibly, and viewers could practically feel the temperature in the room dropping several degrees. This was the moment when a simple promotional interview began its transformation into something much more volatile. "Other factors?" King repeated, her voice carefully neutral. "What kind of factors are you suggesting?" Markle shifted in her chair, her composure beginning to show hairline cracks. "I think you know exactly what I mean, Gayle. The same factors that have been at play since the beginning. The same ones we discussed in that interview with your best friend." The reference to the infamous Oprah interview was unmistakable, and King's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. The professional mask was still in place, but something fundamental had shifted in the dynamic between the two women. "I think we should focus on facts rather than implications," King said, her voice maintaining its professional cadence but carrying a new edge. "The people who've come forward have been quite specific about their experiences. They've talked about late-night calls, unreasonable demands, and what one described as emotional manipulation. These are serious allegations." Markle's laugh was short and humorless. "Emotional manipulation? That's rich. Coming from someone whose network has built an entire segment around dissecting my every move, my family relationships, even my children's privacy. We report the news, Meghan. When you put yourself in the public eye through interviews, statements, and legal battles, that becomes newsworthy. Put myself in the public eye? Markle's voice rose slightly, her careful composure beginning to fray at the edges. I was thrust into a situation that I never asked for, dealing with unprecedented scrutiny and attacks, and when I tried to protect my family and tell my truth, suddenly I'm the problem? King remained steady, her years of experience handling difficult interviews evident in her unwavering focus. No one's saying you're the problem, but accountability works both ways. If you want to tell your truth, you have to be prepared for others to tell theirs. The word accountability seemed to strike a particular nerve. Markle's eyes flashed with anger that she was no longer fully concealing. Accountability? Where was the accountability when the institution I married into failed to protect me? Where was the accountability when lies were spread about me daily while I was pregnant and postpartum? And those are valid concerns that deserve attention, King acknowledged. But that doesn't negate the experiences of people who work directly with you. Two things can be true at the same time. The logical response seemed to frustrate Markle further. Her hands were no longer clasped politely. One was gripping the arm of her chair, while the other gestured emphatically as she spoke. What's fascinating to me is how eager people are to believe anything negative about me, while completely dismissing the systemic issues I've tried to address. King sensed she was approaching a breaking point, but her journalistic instincts pushed her to continue probing. But isn't it possible that both things are true? That you faced unfair treatment and that there were workplace issues that need to be addressed? The question hung in the air like a lit fuse, and everyone in the studio could sense they were approaching a point of no return. Markle's breathing had become slightly more shallow, her perfect posture beginning to show signs of strain as the careful facade she'd maintained for years of public scrutiny started to crack under the pressure of King's relentless questioning. For a moment, the silence stretched uncomfortably long. When Markle finally spoke, her voice carried a barely controlled tremor of rage. You know what, Gayle? This is exactly the problem. You sit there acting like some neutral arbiter of truth, but we both know this isn't journalism. This is character assassination disguised as an interview. King's professional demeanor remained intact, but her eyes hardened. I'm asking legitimate questions based on credible sources. That's what journalists do. Credible sources? Markle's laugh was sharp and bitter. These are disgruntled former employees who signed NDAs and are now conveniently finding ways around them. And you're giving them a platform while treating me like I'm on trial. No one's treating you like you're on trial, King responded evenly. But when you make public statements about your experiences, when you file lawsuits, when you give interviews about feeling silenced, you open the door for others to share their experiences too. Markle's composure was rapidly deteriorating. Her hands were now visibly trembling with anger as she leaned forward in her chair. So, because I dared to speak up about racism and institutional gaslighting, that gives everyone carte blanche to tear me down? Is that what you're telling me? King sensed the interview spiraling but pressed forward. I'm telling you that leadership comes with responsibility. And if multiple people who worked closely with you are raising similar concerns, that's worth examining. Leadership? Markle's voice rose sharply, causing several crew members to exchange alarmed glances. You want to talk about leadership? Let's talk about the leadership that threw a pregnant woman under the bus to protect a system built on exclusion and prejudice. Meghan, I think you're deflecting from the core issue here. I'm deflecting? Markle interrupted, her voice now carrying an unmistakable edge of hysteria. You ambush me with this garbage when I came here in good faith to discuss charitable work, and I'm deflecting? This is exactly the kind of manipulation I've been talking about. The accusation of manipulation seemed to strike a nerve with King, whose professional mask finally showed its first real crack. Nobody ambushed you. These are questions any responsible journalist would ask, given the public discourse around these issues. Responsible journalism? Markle stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the studio floor with a harsh sound that made everyone wince. Is it responsible journalism to amplify unsubstantiated claims from anonymous sources? Is it responsible to ignore the documented harassment and threats my family has received. King remained seated, maintaining what control she could over the rapidly deteriorating situation. Meghan, I think you need to take a breath and don't you dare tell me what I need to do. Markle's voice cracked with emotion and fury. I've spent years being told what I need to do, how I need to behave, what I'm allowed to say. I'm done with that. The studio fell into stunned silence except for the continued whirring of cameras capturing every moment of the meltdown. King looked directly into the camera for a split second before turning back to her guest, clearly calculating whether to continue or call for a commercial break. I understand you're upset, King said carefully, but perhaps we can redirect this conversation towards something more constructive. Constructive? Markle's laugh was harsh and borderline unhinged. You want constructive? Here's something constructive for you and your viewers to consider. Maybe, just maybe, when a woman of color tells you she's being systematically undermined and attacked, you should believe her instead of immediately searching for ways to discredit her. King's eyebrows raised slightly. Nobody's trying to discredit you, Meghan, but playing the race card to deflect from legitimate workplace concerns isn't helpful to anyone. The phrase, playing the race card, landed like a bomb in the studio. Markle's face went through a series of expressions: shock, hurt, and then pure, unadulterated rage. Several crew members could be seen in the background looking deeply uncomfortable, and one producer was frantically gesturing from behind the cameras. Playing the race card? Markle's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. Did you just say I'm playing the race card? King realized immediately that she had crossed a line, but there was no taking it back now. I misspoke. What I meant was, no. You said exactly what you meant. Markle cut her off, her voice gaining strength and venom with each word. This is what happens every single time. The moment a black woman dares to call out injustice, suddenly she's playing cards, pulling cards, making things about race that supposedly aren't about race. Meghan, please sit down. Let's have a rational discussion about this. Rational? Markle's voice was now loud enough that it was probably carrying beyond the studio walls. There's nothing rational about this ambush. You brought me here under false pretenses to humiliate me on national television. King stood up as well, finally abandoning any pretense of maintaining interview protocol. Nobody brought you here under false pretenses. You agreed to this interview knowing full well that current events would be discussed. Current events? Markle's voice reached a pitch that made several crew members wince. These aren't current events. These are coordinated attacks designed to destroy my reputation and silence me permanently. The confrontation had now moved completely beyond the confines of a normal interview. Both women were standing, facing off against each other with palpable hostility. King's professional composure was hanging by a thread as she tried to regain control of a situation that had spiraled completely out of hand. I think we need to take a break, King said firmly, gesturing toward the cameras. Oh no, Markle said, her voice carrying a dangerous edge. We're not taking a break. You started this, Gayle. You wanted to have this conversation on live television, so let's have it. Let's talk about how your network has spent years profiting off my pain while pretending to care about truth and justice. The studio was now in complete chaos, with producers frantically trying to figure out whether to cut to commercial or continue filming what was clearly becoming one of the most explosive confrontations in live television history. King made one final attempt to salvage the situation, her voice taking on an authoritative tone. Meghan, I need you to calm down and return to your seat. This behavior is completely unprofessional. The word unprofessional was the final straw. Markle's eyes blazed with fury as she stepped closer to King, her voice dropping to a deadly whisper that somehow carried more menace than her previous shouting. Unprofessional? You want to see unprofessional, Gayle? Without warning, Markle reached for the small microphone clipped to her blazer and yanked it off, the sudden movement creating a sharp feedback screech that echoed through the studio. She held the mic in her hand for a moment, staring at it with disgust before throwing it down onto the interview table where it landed with a loud clatter. You know what's unprofessional? Markle continued, her voice now carrying clearly without amplification. Ambushing a guest, weaponizing their trauma, and then having the audacity to lecture them about professionalism when they refuse to be your punching bag. King watched in stunned silence as Markle began gathering her purse and jacket from beside her chair. The entire studio crew had gone completely silent, transfixed by the unprecedented meltdown happening before their eyes. "This is exactly what I was talking about," Markle said, her voice now steady but filled with cold rage. "This is the machine in action. You invite me here, you smile, you pretend to be my friend, and then you systematically try to destroy me while cameras roll." "Nobody's trying to destroy you," King protested weakly, but her words sounded hollow even to her own ears. Markle turned to face her directly, and for a moment, the anger gave way to something that looked almost like pity. "The sad thing is, I don't think you even realize you're doing it. You've become so much a part of this system that you can't see how toxic it island." King's professional instincts kicked in one last time. "Meghan, if you leave now, you'll be proving their point. You'll be confirming everything they've said about your inability to handle pressure." The manipulation attempt was so transparent that several crew members actually gasped audibly. Markle's response was swift and devastating. "Their point?" she said, her voice rising again. "Their point is that I should sit here and smile while you tear me apart for entertainment. Their point is that I should be grateful for the abuse because it comes with fame and money." She slung her purse over her shoulder and took a step toward the studio exit. "Well, here's my point, Gayle. I don't have to take this from you, from this network, or from anyone else. I have spent years being told that speaking up makes me difficult, that defending myself makes me a diva, that refusing to accept mistreatment makes me ungrateful." King made one last desperate attempt to maintain control. "The cameras are still rolling, Meghan. Think about how this looks." Markle stopped dead in her tracks and slowly turned around, a smile spreading across her face that was somehow more terrifying than her previous anger. "How this looks? You're worried about how this looks?" She walked back toward the interview area, but instead of sitting down, she looked directly into the main camera. "You want to know how this looks? This looks like a woman who finally decided she's worth more than being someone else's victim." Turning back to King, she continued, "You and your producers thought you could bring me here and humiliate me for ratings. You thought you could use my pain and my struggle as content for your show. But here's what you didn't count on. I'm done being anyone's entertainment." The studio was so quiet that the hum of the air conditioning system seemed deafeningly loud. King stood frozen, clearly realizing that she had not only lost control of the interview, but had potentially created a public relations nightmare for the network. Markle picked up the microphone she had thrown down earlier and held it up like a weapon. "This little piece of technology, right here, this is what you use to amplify voices, right? Well, consider my voice amplified." She dropped the microphone again, this time deliberately, and the sound it made hitting the floor seemed to echo through the stunned silence like a gavel falling in a courtroom. "I came here today to talk about helping people, about making a difference, about using my platform for good," she said, her voice now completely calm and controlled. "Instead, you turned it into a circus designed to tear me down. Well, congratulations, Gayle. You got your circus. I hope the ratings were worth it." She turned toward the exit, then paused one final time. "To everyone watching at home, this is what happens when you dare to speak truth to power. This is what happens when you refuse to stay in your place. They try to break you down, discredit you, make you look crazy or difficult or ungrateful." Her voice grew stronger with each word. "But I want you to know that you don't have to accept it. You don't have to smile while they destroy you. You have the right to walk away from anyone who doesn't treat you with basic human dignity." King finally found her voice. "Meghan, please don't leave like this. We can work through this conversation." Markle laughed, but this time it wasn't bitter or angry. It was genuinely amused. "Work through this? Gayle, there's nothing to work through. This is exactly who you are, and this is exactly who I am. The difference is, I'm finally comfortable with that." She began walking toward the studio exit, her heels clicking authoritatively on the polished floor. The sound seemed to snap everyone out of their shocked silence, and suddenly there was a flurry of activity as producers tried to figure out what to do next. "Cut to commercial!" someone shouted from behind the cameras, but Markle held up her hand. "No," she said firmly. "Let them see this. Let them see what happens when someone finally says, 'Enough is enough.'" She reached the studio door and paused with her hand on the handle, turning back one final time to address the cameras directly. "For years, I let other people control my narrative. I let them decide what story to tell about me, how to frame my actions, what parts of my truth were acceptable to share. Her voice grew powerful and clear. But today, I'm taking that power back. Today, I'm walking away from this toxic circus, and I'm never coming back. Not to this show, not to this network, and not to any platform that thinks my pain is their content. With that, she pushed open the studio door and walked out, leaving behind a stunned silence that lasted for several long seconds before the chaos erupted. King stood alone at the interview area, the empty chair across from her, serving as a stark reminder of how completely the interview had imploded. The cameras continued rolling, capturing King's shocked expression and the frantic activity of the crew as they tried to process what had just happened. It was clear that this confrontation would be talked about for years to come, marking the moment when Meghan Markle finally decided she was done playing by everyone else's rules. The studio door swung shut behind her with a definitive click, ending one of the most explosive confrontations in television history.